That wedding night, I learned that a hug can conceal betrayal, and that a perfect smile can mask the cruelest intentions. My name is Grace Rogers. I'm 59 years old, mother to 2 children, and the owner of a house I built with my own 2 hands and every penny of my life savings. This is a story I kept buried for so long, buried under layers of shame, fear, and a mother's fierce love. But today, I must tell it, because my silence nearly destroyed everything I held dear. It all began 6 months before the wedding. My son Daniel, my firstborn, came home one afternoon in April wearing that nervous smile I'd known since he was a little boy. He was holding the hand of a stunning woman, long flowing hair, piercing light eyes. Her name was Valerie. "Mom, I want you to meet someone very special," he said, his voice trembling with excitement. I remember every detail of that moment. She wore an immaculate white pantsuit, expensive high heels, and a perfume so intoxicating it seemed to fill every corner of the living room. She embraced me as though we'd known each other for years. "Mrs. Rogers, Daniel has told me so much about you. It's such an honor to finally meet you." I brewed strong coffee, the way I always do for important guests, and we settled on the back patio beneath the bougainvillea my late husband Robert had planted with his own hands. Daniel couldn't stop smiling. Valerie spoke with such elegance, such precision. She knew exactly what to say, when to laugh, when to reach across and gently touch my hand. But something inside me stirred, something small and indefinable that didn't feel quite right. It was nothing I could name or explain, just a sensation, like when you smell rain in the air moments before the first drops fall. "Mom, we're getting married," Daniel announced that same afternoon, his eyes brimming with hope. And I, like any mother who loves her son beyond measure, smiled brightly and hugged them both. But that night, alone in my bedroom with my house keys hanging on the nightstand where they always rested, I wondered why my hands wouldn't stop trembling. Sometimes we place our trust in the wrong people. Have you ever been disappointed by someone you loved? Share your story in the comments. I want to hear it. The months that followed swept by in a whirlwind of wedding preparations. Valerie came to the house almost daily, arriving with bridal magazines, flower samples, and endless checklists. Daniel worked long, grueling hours at his construction company, so it was often just the 2 of us, sitting at the dining table, surrounded by papers and decisions that seemed to multiply by the day. "Mrs. Rogers, you have such impeccable taste. What do you think of these centerpieces?" I prepare iced tea, slice fresh fruit, and listen as she talked about her family. She said she came from out of state, that her parents had died when she was young, that she had no siblings. She was completely alone in the world. "That's why Daniel is everything to me," she said one afternoon, her eyes glistening with what looked like unshed tears. "And you are too, Mrs. Rogers. I've always dreamed of having a family like this." Those words moved something deep within me. I thought of my own mother, who died when I was only 25. I thought about what it means to grow up without roots, without a foundation. And so I opened my heart completely. I showed her Daniel's childhood photo albums, the pictures of gap-toothed smiles and scraped knees. I told her how Robert and I had built this house brick by painstaking brick, how we'd saved every dollar so our children could attend college. I showed her the garden he'd tended every Sunday morning before the cancer took him 7 years ago. "This house is my entire life," I told her, running my hand across the wooden table where we'd shared thousands of breakfasts. "Every wall, every floorboard, it all holds our memories." Valerie took my hand in hers, squeezing gently. "And it always will be, Mrs. Rogers. I would never want to take anything from you. I just want to become part of this beautiful family." I remember that moment with painful clarity. The afternoon sunlight streaming through the window, the aroma of fresh coffee drifting from the kitchen. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't alone anymore. Daniel came home that evening with Chinese takeout and small toy musicians that played silly, cheerful songs. The 3 of us laughed like children. Valerie embraced my son with such apparent tenderness that I thought, my Daniel is truly blessed. That night, before sleep claimed me, I held my house keys in my hands. There were 3 of them, the front door key, the back gate key, and the key to the safe deposit box where I kept important documents and my mother's precious jewelry. I had never let them out of my sight, not even for a moment. But that night, for the first time, I thought, perhaps someday these keys will belong to Valerie, too. Perhaps this is how you build a family, through trust and sharing. I closed my eyes, feeling genuinely at peace. I didn't know that my peace was merely the deceptive silence before a devastating storm. The first crack in the facade appeared 1 week before the wedding, though I didn't recognize it at the time. It was a Friday afternoon. Daniel had traveled to Chicago for an urgent construction project, leaving Valerie and me alone. She arrived earlier than usual, her hair pulled back in a severe ponytail, wearing an expression I hadn't seen before. She looked exhausted, or was it worried? I couldn't quite tell. "Are you all right, sweetheart?" I asked, pouring her a glass of cold lemonade. "Yes, Mrs. Rogers. It's just wedding stress. So many loose ends to tie up." She sat in the living room, but not in her usual relaxed manner. This time, she didn't pull out her wedding binder or lengthy to-do list. She simply stared out the window, hands clasped tightly in her lap. I settled beside her with my knitting. I was finishing a blanket for their wedding gift, crocheted in ivory and gold. Every stitch was a silent prayer for my son's happiness. "Did you confirm the final guest count?" I asked, attempting to fill the heavy silence. "Yes, 150 people. And the best man, Daniel's friend, what was his name again?" There was a pause. One of those pauses that seems to stretch and thicken the air around you. "Mark," she said without looking at me. "Mark Evans. He and Daniel have known each other since college." "Oh, yes." "Daniel's mentioned him. He seems like a good man." Valerie nodded, but something in her expression shifted. It was just a flicker, barely a second, but I saw how her hands tightened against the fabric of her skirt. "Did you meet him long ago?" I pressed, not understanding why I kept pushing. "Not long. I met him when Daniel and I started dating. He's very nice." She left the sentence hanging in the air like a damp towel on a line. We sat in uncomfortable silence. Or rather, I knitted while she stared at the ceiling, lost in thoughts she clearly had no intention of sharing. Then her phone rang. I watched as she pulled it from her bag, glanced at the screen, and her entire face tensed. She rejected the call without answering. 10 seconds later, it rang again. She rejected it again. "Aren't you going to answer?" I asked gently. "It's not important, just an unknown number." But her hands were trembling visibly. I stood to refill my water glass. When I returned, I found her standing by the living room shelf, staring intently at a framed photograph. It showed Daniel and me on his college graduation day. Him in his cap and gown, me in a sky blue dress, both of us beaming in the May sunshine. "What a beautiful picture," Valerie said, but her voice sounded distant, as though she were speaking from behind a thick pane of glass. "That was one of the happiest days of my life," I said, standing beside her. "Robert, my husband, was so incredibly proud. He kept repeating it all night. 'That's my son, the engineer.'" Valerie nodded but said nothing. Then she did something peculiar. She began walking slowly around the living room, examining every corner with an intensity that made me uneasy. She stopped in front of the glass cabinet where I kept my mother's antique china, the cut crystal glasses, the delicate porcelain plates. "You have such beautiful things, Mrs. Rogers," she said, touching the glass with her fingertips. "They're family heirlooms. Some pieces are over 50 years old. Are they worth a lot?" The question caught me off guard. Not what she asked, but how she asked it, as though she were pricing items in a store. "I don't know, dear. To me, they're priceless. They're my history, my connection to those I've loved." Valerie smiled, but the smile never reached her eyes. "Of course, Mrs. Rogers. Forgive me for asking." She stayed a few more minutes, but we didn't discuss wedding details anymore. No flowers, no dresses, no seating arrangements. We exchanged empty words that filled the space between us, but left a hollow feeling in my chest. When she left, I sat in the living room with my knitting in my hands, feeling something strange constricting around my heart, something that felt uncomfortably like fear, though it had no clear shape or form. That night, Daniel called from Chicago. "How are you, Mom?" Everything okay there? Everything's fine, sweetheart. Valerie stopped by. She seemed a bit quiet, but I suppose that's normal with all the preparation. Yeah, she's been really stressed, but it's almost over. In 1 week, I'll be a married man, Mom. Can you believe it? His voice rang with such pure happiness. I didn't have a heart to burden him with my vague, formless concerns. I can believe it, son. And I'll be right there in the front row with a tissue in my hand. We laughed together. He blew me a kiss through the phone before we hung up, but I didn't sleep well that night. I got up at 3 a.m. and walked through the house, checking windows, doors, and locks. Everything appeared in order, yet I felt as though something fundamental had changed, as though the very air in my house had shifted. I went to my bedroom and opened my nightstand drawer. My keys were there, exactly where they should be, all 3 of them, untouched. I lifted them and squeezed them tightly in my palm. I didn't understand why, but in that moment, I felt an overwhelming need to protect them, as though someone were waiting in the shadows, wanting to take them from me. As I share this part of my story, I wonder where you might be listening from. Write the name of your city in the comments. The following days passed in a blur, the way things do when you're afraid to look too closely. Fast, indistinct, like close your eyes while crossing a danger street. Daniel returned from Chicago on Sunday night, arriving with a suitcase full of wrinkled clothes and an exhausted smile. I hugged him at the door as I always do, breathing in a familiar cologne mixed with the dust of travel. You look exhausted, son. It was a tough week, Mom, but I'm here. We're almost married. I sat him down in the kitchen and warmed up the pozole I'd saved from Friday. I watched him devour it with child hunger, cleaning his plate with warm tortillas. As I observed him, I thought, why worry him with my irrational concerns? It's just nerves. And that's how my silence truly began. On Monday, Valerie arrived early with a new folder containing final menus and table seating charts. The 3 of us sat together at the dining table, her, Daniel, and me. Morning sunlight streamed to the window, making everything appear bright and innocent. Mom, we placed you at the main table next to my brother and our aunts, Daniel said, pointing at the diagram. And Mark, I asked without thinking. Valerie's head snapped up with startling speed. Mark will be at the head table as best man, she answered with a perfect smile. That's traditional. Of course, I murmured, feeling as though I'd asked the wrong question. Daniel noticed nothing unusual. He continued reviewing numbers, counting chairs, checking names. But Valerie was looking at me, and in that look, there was something that definitely wasn't affection. It was a warning. That afternoon, after Daniel left for a work meeting, Valerie stayed behind. She said she wanted to help me organize the guest room closet, where the bridesmaids would prepare on the wedding day. We went upstairs together, me carrying clean sheets, her carrying her phone. I opened the closet and began removing old boxes, winter clothes, and blankets I no longer used. Mrs. Rogers, you have this enormous house all to yourself, Valerie observed, scanning the room with calculating eyes. Have you ever considered selling it? Moving into something more manageable? I froze, a box still in my hands. Sell my house. I don't mean it negatively. I'm simply thinking about your comfort. This is a lot of space for one person, and the maintenance must be expensive. This house is my life, Valerie. My children grew up within these walls. I shared decades here with Robert. I know, she interrupted smoothly. I'm just thinking ahead. Daniel and I have discussed that perhaps in a few years. We could move in here with you. That way you wouldn't have to be alone. Those words should have comforted me. Instead, they chill me to my core. That's very kind of you, dear. But for now, I'm perfectly fine here. Valerie smiled, though her eyes remained cold. Of course, Mrs. Rogers. You know what's best. We descended the stairs in heavy silence. My heart raced as though I just climbed a steep mountain. I couldn't understand why I felt this way. She was my future daughter-in-law, the woman my son loved. Why was I afraid of her? That night, as I washed the dinner dishes, I told myself firmly, Grace, you're being foolish. You're becoming a jealous, possessive mother-in-law. Let Daniel find his happiness. and I decided to stay quiet. On Tuesday, Mark arrived. Daniel had invited him to dinner, so we could meet before the wedding. He was a tall man in an impeccable gray suit, with slick back hair and a smile that revealed teeth that were almost unnaturally white. He brought a bottle of expensive wine and a bouquet of flowers for me. Mrs. Rogers, it's truly an honor to meet you. Daniel has told me so much about you. The honor is mine, young man. Daniel says you two are very close friends. Like brothers, ma'am. We've been inseparable since college. We gathered around the table. I had prepared a special dinner. Rice, beans, grilled meat, and fresh juice. The food was perfect. The conversation flowed smoothly. Mark was undeniably charming, skilled at telling amusing anecdotes that made Daniel laugh freely. But I watched him carefully. I watched how he looked at Valerie. It wasn't the look of a friend. It was something else, something that lingered a fraction of a second too long. Something in the way she passed him the salt without him asking, in how their hands brushed when they both reached for the water pitcher simultaneously. "Excuse me," he said, laughing. "No, sorry," she replied, pulling her hand away quickly. Too quickly. Daniel saw nothing. He was happily eating and recounting stories about when he and Mark had traveled to Austin in college and gotten hopelessly lost. "Your mother must have been beside herself with worry," Mark said, turning to me. I was sick with nerves, I replied, smiling. They were missing for 3 whole days. "Different times, Mrs. Rogers. Now with cell phones, everything's easier. Easier, more complicated," I said without thinking. Mark looked at me with sudden interest. "What do you mean?" "I mean that now you can always know where people are, but you can also hide where you really are." A heavy silence descended. Valerie set her fork down on her plate with sharp metallic noise. "Mrs. Rogers is absolutely right," she said in a firm voice. "Technology is a double-edged sword." Daniel laughed, breaking the tension. Mom suddenly turned philosopher. "What's gotten into you?" "Nothing, son. Just the musings of old age." We continued dinner. Mark left at 11 after helping clear the table, saying goodbye with a strong hug for Daniel and a kiss on Valerie's cheek that lasted, again, a second too long. When they were all gone, I remained in the kitchen washing dishes that were already clean, simply to occupy my trembling hands. On Wednesday, 3 days before the wedding, I received a phone call that would change everything. It was from an unknown number. I almost never answer calls from numbers I don't recognize, but something compelled me to pick up. "Mrs. Grace Rogers?" "Yes, this is she." "Who's calling?" "I apologize for disturbing you, ma'am. This is a Palace Hotel in Las Vegas. We have a pending matter on file for Daniel Rogers, and we want to confirm a reservation from last month." "Las Vegas? My son hasn't been to Las Vegas. Let me check our records." It shows a reservation from September 15th through the 18th. A double room registered under the names Daniel Rogers and, wait one moment, Valerie. My heart stopped beating. "Are you certain?" "Yes, ma'am. The reservation was paid in cash, but the registration is in our system. We're calling because some belongings were left in the room. Would you like us to mail them?" No, that won't be necessary. There must be some mistake. My son was working in September." "I understand, ma'am. Thank you for your time." I hung up the phone, my hands shaking violently. Las Vegas. September. Daniel had told me he was somewhere else. I couldn't even remember where. Supervising some construction project. I paced the living room in agitation. I dialed Daniel's number 3 separate times, but disconnected before it could ring. What would I say? That someone from a hotel had called? That perhaps Valerie had accompanied him, and he hadn't mentioned it? Or maybe... No, I couldn't allow myself to think that. I decided it must be a mistake, a misunderstanding, a different Daniel Rogers with a different Valerie. That's how we lie to ourselves when the truth is too painful to bear. On Thursday, we had the wedding rehearsal at St. Jerome's Church, that beautiful old building with its soaring domed ceiling and blue stained glass windows. Father Michael greeted us with his kind, welcoming smile. We practiced the entrance, the readings, the sacred vows. Daniel was nervous, constantly messing up his steps and laughing at himself. Valerie was flawless, walking with perfect grace, knowing exactly where to stand and when to turn. Mark stood there with a practice ring, looking serious and refined. I sat in the front pew, watching everything unfold, and then I witnessed something that turned my blood to ice. When everyone was distracted, when Daniel was deep in conversation with Father Michael about the scripture readings, Valerie and Mark were left alone near the altar, ostensibly reviewing the order of service. He placed his hand on her lower back. She didn't move away. They looked at each other, just for a second, nothing more. But in that single second, the entire world seemed to disappear except for the two of them. And I knew with that terrible certainty that only mothers possess that something was very, very wrong. But I said nothing, because I had already decided to remain silent, because I thought perhaps I was imagining things that weren't there, because I didn't want to be the bitter mother-in-law who destroys her son's happiness. That night, Daniel embraced me before leaving. Thanks, Mom. Thank you for being here, for supporting me, for loving Valerie. I will always be here for you, sweetheart. Always. When I closed the door behind him, I leaned against it and cried silently. I cried because something deep inside me already knew the truth. I cried because I didn't have the courage to speak it aloud. I still wonder if I made the right choice by staying silent. What about you? What would you have done in my place? Friday arrived like any ordinary day, one of those days that changes everything without warning, with the same sun as always, the same birds singing in the garden. It was the eve of the wedding. I rose at 6 a.m. as I always do, brewing coffee on the stove and listening to that familiar bubbling sound that had accompanied me through 35 years of marriage and 7 years of widowhood. I opened the windows to let in the fresh October air, that air unique to autumn mornings that smells like damp earth even when it hasn't rained. Daniel would arrive at 10, Valerie at 11. We needed to collect the suits, confirm the flowers, and finalize the last details with the venue. Everything had to be absolutely perfect. But I couldn't get that hotel call out of my head. Las Vegas, September. Double room. As I drank my coffee, sitting at the dining table in my bathrobe and old slippers, I wondered, what if I called the hotel back? What if I asked for more specific details? What if I request to see the actual register? But then I heard Robert's voice in my head, as clear as if he were sitting beside me. Grace, don't go looking for trouble where there isn't any. Trust your son. So I set the phone aside and dedicated myself to cleaning the house with furious energy. I dusted every surface, swept and mopped all the floors, washed the dining room curtains, changed the sheets in the guest room, pruned the roses in the garden. Anything to keep my hands busy and my mind quiet. Daniel arrived precisely on time, his truck loaded with boxes, and wearing a smile that illuminated his entire face. Mom, I'm getting married tomorrow. I hugged him tightly, breathing in his cologne, feeling his strong, bare hug, just like when he was a boy returning from school with scraped knees. Tomorrow you're getting married, sweetheart, and you're going to be so incredibly happy. I know, Mom. Valerie is amazing. She's a woman of my dreams. Those words pierced my chest like broken glass, because I wanted desperately to believe them. I wanted so badly for them to be true. We ate breakfast together. I made his favorites: huevos rancheros, refried beans, hot tortillas, and hot chocolate with cinnamon. He ate with that appetite he'd never outgrown, wiping his plate clean with pieces of tortilla. Mom, you cook like an angel. Angels don't cook, silly. They have much better things to do. We laughed, and for one precious moment, everything felt like it used to be, just him and me against the world. At 11 o'clock, Valerie arrived wearing a casual white dress, gold sandals, her hair flowing loose across her shoulders. She came with two friends who would serve as her bridesmaids, Sarah and Megan, two young, elegantly dressed women who chattered endlessly about influencers and trendy restaurants. Mrs. Rogers, may I use your bedroom to leave some things? We're coming very early tomorrow to get ready. Of course, dear. Use whatever you need. The three of them headed upstairs carrying suitcases, makeup bags, and shoe boxes. I remained downstairs with Daniel, reviewing confirmed guest list. 148 people, Mom. 2 uncles couldn't make it. That's perfectly fine, son. The people who truly need to be there will be. Then I heard a noise from upstairs, like something had fallen. "I'll go see if they need any help," I said. I climbed the stairs slowly, gripping the banister for support. My knees weren't what they used to be. When I reached the upstairs hallway, I heard voices coming from my bedroom. The door was slightly ajar. "Are you sure it's in here?" one of the friends asked. I think it was Sarah. "It has to be," Valerie answered. "Daniel told me his mother keeps everything in that safe in the closet." My heart lurched violently in my chest. I moved closer without making a sound. Through the gap in the door, I could see Valerie standing in front of my closet. The same closet where I kept my small wall safe hidden behind winter coats. "But you need the key, right?" Megan asked. "She has the keys. She carries them everywhere," Valerie replied in a tone I'd never heard before, cold, calculating, devoid of warmth. "But after tomorrow, all of this will be ours anyway." My breath caught painfully in my throat. "Does Daniel know?" Sarah asked carefully. "Daniel doesn't need to know everything," Valerie said with chilling casualness, closing the closet door. "It's better this way. He's sweet, too sweet sometimes." The three of them laughed, a laugh that sliced through me like a razor-sharp knife. I backed away slowly, silently, like a ghost haunting my own home. I descended the stairs with trembling legs, steadying myself against the wall. When I reached the living room, Daniel was on the phone with the event venue. I gestured that I was going to the garden. I slipped out the back door and sat on the iron bench beneath the bougainvillea, the same place where Robert and I used to drink coffee on Sunday mornings. I took deep breaths. Once, twice, 3 times. All of this will be ours anyway. What did that mean? Was she talking about eventually inheriting through marriage to Daniel? Or was she talking about something far more sinister? I touched the pocket of my pants. My keys were there, all 3 of them. I always carried them with me. Since Robert died, those keys have been my security, my control, my certainty that this house was still truly mine. I sat there watching the garden flowers sway in the breeze until I heard Daniel's voice calling for me. "Mom, where are you?" "Here, son, in the garden." He came outside with Valerie and her friends, all of them smiling as though nothing whatsoever had happened. "Mrs. Rogers, we're all finished. We've left everything ready for tomorrow," Valerie said brightly, kissing my cheek. I smelled her expensive perfume, felt her cold cheek against mine. "That's wonderful, dear." "Are you all right, Mom? You look pale," Daniel said with concern. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just a bit tired. It's a lot of excitement." "Rest well, Mrs. Rogers. Tomorrow's going to be a very long day," Valerie said, taking both my hands in hers. "And such a beautiful one. The most beautiful day of our lives." She squeezed my hands hard, too hard, and when she looked directly into my eyes, I saw something that froze me to my core. It wasn't love. It wasn't gratitude. It was triumph. They all left together. Daniel hugged me at the door. "I love you, Mom. Thank you for everything." "I love you too, son. More than you could ever know." I closed the door and leaned heavily against it. For a full minute, I simply focused on breathing. Then I walked slowly to my bedroom. I opened the closet, moved aside the sweaters, jackets, and shoe boxes I no longer used. And there it was, my small wall safe with its combination lock. I opened it carefully. Inside were the house documents, the deeds registered in my name, some cash I'd been saving, and my mother's jewelry, a gold ring set with emeralds, pearl earrings, and antique silver chain. Everything appeared in order. Nothing was missing, but someone had wanted desperately to get inside. I closed the safe and concealed it again. I sat on the edge of my bed with the keys clutched against my chest. What was really happening? Who was Valerie truly? The phone rang, startling me. It was my sister Lucy calling from Phoenix. "How are you, Grace? Ready for the big wedding?" "Yes, Lucy. Everything's set." "You sound strange. What's wrong?" And then, for the first time, I spoke aloud what I've been thinking for days. "I think something is wrong with Valerie." There was a heavy silence on the other end of the line. "What kind of wrong?" "I don't know exactly. Just strange things. Things she says, things she does." A call from a hotel in Las Vegas where she and Daniel supposedly stayed. But Daniel never mentioned it to me. And today I overheard her talking to her friends about my safe. Your safe? Why would she be discussing that? I don't know, Lucy. I truly don't know. But I have a terrible feeling deep in my gut. What are you going to do? That was the question, wasn't it? What was I going to do? I don't know, I repeated helplessly. What can I do? Tell Daniel one day before his wedding that I think his fiancée is a liar? Ruin the happiest day of his life because I have an unsubstantiated hunch. Grace, you don't get hunches. If you feel something is wrong, it's because something genuinely is wrong. But I don't have proof, Lucy. I only have this fear eating away at me. My sister sighed deeply. Listen to me carefully. I'll arrive early tomorrow morning. I'll be there with you. And we're going to stay on high alert, all right? If anything happens, if anything feels wrong at all, we'll face it together. But you cannot stay silent, Grace. Not again. That last sentence stung because Lucy remembered. She remembered when I'd stayed silent for years about problems in my marriage, about Robert's debts that I'd paid in secret, about so many things I kept quiet to preserve the peace. All right, Lucy, I'll see you tomorrow. I love you, sister. I love you, too. I hung up the phone feeling slightly less alone, but the fear remained coiled tightly in my chest. I didn't eat dinner that night. I couldn't force anything down. I made chamomile tea and sat in the living room with a blanket over my legs, looking through old photo albums. Daniel as a baby with his toothless smile. Daniel at his first communion, in his white suit clutching a Bible. Daniel graduating from college with Robert and me on either side, all of us bursting with pride. Valerie wasn't in any of those photographs. And yet tomorrow she would become his wife, part of this family, part of my life. I closed the album and looked out the window. The moon hung full and round in the sky, white as a porcelain plate. And then I saw something that made me leap to my feet. A car was parked directly across the street. A black car with tinted windows, engine off. It wasn't a vehicle from our neighborhood. I would have recognized it. I moved to the window carefully, not turning on any lights. I tried to see who was inside, but the windows were too dark. The car sat there motionless for 15 long minutes, as if waiting for something or someone. Then, without turning on its headlights, it started slowly and disappeared around the corner. I closed the curtains with trembling hands. I went upstairs to my room, locked the door, and placed the keys beneath my pillow. That night, I slept in my clothes with my shoes on, ready for anything, because something deep inside me already knew. Tomorrow wouldn't be a wedding. It would be a battle, and I needed to be prepared. Saturday dawned with an impossibly blue sky. Not a single cloud anywhere, as if the universe itself were mocking me. I woke at 5 a.m, my entire body aching from sleeping so tensely. The keys were still beneath my pillow. I retrieved them and placed them securely in the pocket of my robe, feeling their familiar weight against my hip. I went downstairs and made coffee, needing desperately to be alert and ready for whatever might come. At 6 o'clock, Lucy arrived like a whirlwind, bringing her suitcase, her strong embrace, and that comforting lavender scent that always accompanied her. She was 3 years younger than me, but looked even younger still, with short modern hair, fashionable glasses, and the energy of someone who had never stayed silent about anything. "How are you holding up?" she asked, gripping my shoulders and looking directly into my eyes. "Terrified." "I know. I can see it written all over your face. But breathe, Grace. Just breathe. You're going to get through today. I'm here with you." We ate breakfast together in heavy silence. Pastries, coffee with milk, cut fruit. Outside, the city was beginning to wake up. Birds sang in the garden. Everything seemed so normal, so ordinary, that for a moment I questioned whether I was exaggerating everything. But then I remembered Valerie's chilling words. All of this would be ours anyway, and I knew with certainty that I wasn't losing my mind. At 8 a.m, Valerie and her friends arrived, bursting in like a gust of perfume, laughter, and countless makeup bags. Valerie carried her wedding dress in a giant garment bag, pure white silk embroidered with thousands of beads. It was stunning, extraordinarily expensive. Too expensive for a young woman who claimed to be completely alone in a world with no family support. Mrs. Rogers, good morning. How did you sleep? Well enough, dear. And you? I didn't sleep at all. Too many nerves. She laughed, but the sound felt metallic, artificial. Today I married the absolute love of my life. Lucy stood beside me, and I felt her entire body tense. Good morning, Valerie. I'm Lucy, Grace's sister. Oh, Lucy, what a pleasure to finally meet you. Daniel has told me so much about you. They kissed each other's cheeks like two opponents, sizing each other up before a duel. We're going upstairs to get ready, all right? Valerie announced, gesturing toward the stairs. The three of them ascended. Her, Sarah, retry. This response paused because Claude reached its max length for a message. Hit continued and nudged Claude along.